Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to another episode of The Real Time Show. With me, your friendly neighborhood jeweler, Alon Joseph. Today, I'm very honored and proud to welcome to the virtual studio my long time and long lost friend, Jorn Werdelin, the co-founder of Linde Werdelin watches. How are you, Jorn?
I'm great, and thank you so much for having me on your show. Like you said, it's been a long time since we've seen each other, but so it goes with time, doesn't it? So I'm in Estoril in Portugal, and I moved here I moved to Portugal from London about 2.5 years ago. As you were too, we were in the pandemic, and after 1 year, I just felt that being kind of imprisoned in our home was not really the way that I saw my future. So I got this idea that we needed a place to escape to, and then that place to escape to became, moving here.
Congrats on that and good on you. So I'm very happy to have you on the show. Why? Because Rob and I started over a year ago with the Real Time Show, and both of us loved the brand Linde Werdelin, and we're always fascinated by you two Scandi crazy guys that set up a cool brand, moved to London, made amazing watches, and then it seemed that you guys fell off the radar. So then we on air said, you know what, we need to reach out to them and see if we can get them on air and see what the heck has happened to them. So please, Jorn, walk me through why you two guys started LW. And for our dear listeners, if you're not familiar with the brand Linde Werdelin, you can find them online, LindeWerdilin.com, and on Insta, it's exactly the same at Linde Werdelin.
So when we started in 2002, we're 21 years old now. And Morten and I, we've been longtime friends. We've known each other since we were about 6 years old. And we had this idea that you should be able to attach functionality, digital functionality, onto mechanical timepieces, and which was obviously something that had never really been done before. What we looked at also were, watches like Breitling and Tissot. You remember the T-Touch, where you kind of mixed in the digital into the analog and mechanical. And we thought that was a compromise. So we started developing mechanical timepieces and instruments. And the instruments were for skiing and for diving, which are the two universes that we have always been in. And that comes from personal passion. I've always skied. My dad took us to Switzerland when we were out 6 or 7 years old, and then onwards from there. So my dad, he imported and retailed watches and jewelry to Denmark. So it was a bit sort of a slightly different upbringing from other Danes in the 60s and 70s. And I think those two passions have followed me along since. But anyway, so in 2002 we started working on the watches and the instruments, and we launched in 2007. And it was very new, the idea, the concept we had. You have to remember, this is about the time that the iPhone came around. Think about how that changed the world. And then we participated in Geneva, in Basel. We got distributors around the world, retailers, and I would say we followed a sort of semi-traditional distribution model, but at the same time we had a very sort of forward-looking marketing communication model. We went digital straight away, and didn't waste money or time on prints, which was a good choice. And between, I would say, nine, because eight was a, 08 was a difficult year because of the financial crisis. But from 2009 until 2015, we grew very, very quickly. And then the world changed in 2015-16, and we changed the way that we operated, because what I found was that the distribution, the traditional distribution model, was fraught in the way that we sold a lot of watches, but it was very difficult to control, and it was difficult in tough times to make sure that our watches kind of maintained their price. And so we decided to change the way that we saw. We already had a very successful direct business, which we started, literally from the beginning. And then we said, well, if we have to kind of focus on one horse or bet on one horse, we will bet on the direct business, because it gives us control, and it gives us control of the aftermarket, the pre-owned, and there will never be too many watches in the market. There will always be one less that we have sold. You see what I mean? And that's kind of the model that we have pursued since 16 up until now. And literally as we speak, we have very tentatively started going back into a little bit of retail, primarily in markets where we don't have access very easily, such as South Korea, where we have just turned on, such as Japan, and we will probably also be a few places in the US, because that's our main market.
For our listeners that are not that familiar with the brand, and then Jorn is very modest and went through it quickly, but I remember vividly the first time I've encountered their watches and the brand, literally 2 decades ago, was when a buddy of mine, who also skis like I do, sent me over this crazy idea of a mechanical automatic watch with what I then called the 21st century of Danish design. I mean, the Danes are obviously very famous for design, and they have their own design language. The Dutch design movement is in the shadow of Danish design. I called it very edgy in the 21st century Danish design. And then with a square module that was basically a board computer clicked on top. That it blew my mind. And I've been in love with Linde Werdelin ever since. And that's what you're referring at, right?
Yep, exactly.
Before we tumbled down the rabbit hole and the evolution of the brand. So Morten and you, two buddies from Denmark, started watches. I can guess why, because your dad wasn't watching, but you, if I remember correctly, started as a banker.
Yeah, I graduated. I took a master's in Denmark in 1990, and and I had this desire to move abroad. So 4 days later, I was in Paris, and learning French, and then I got offered a job in an investment bank in Paris, and I worked there for half a year as what it was probably still called a stagiaire, which is a very lowly paid analyst, and then after that I moved to London and worked in investment banking for about almost 10 years until year 2001. And then I had enough of that. I mean, the intellectual challenge was obviously, super exciting and interesting, but the whole work and working as an agent and not as a principal, and then Morten and I, we always had a very good dialogue about everything, products, design. He comes from a furniture family background, and we had sort of very common, first of all, culture, I think is very important, but also, aesthetics. So it was very easy for us to work together on a product because we literally never disagreed. But then again, having said that, there is a huge difference from actually creating something to kind of knowing whether it's good or bad. And I'm not the the creator, and Morten was and is, and that's really how it got started. And for that, Morten, he would come to me and say, what do you think? And I'd say, well, that's great, or maybe could it be like this, or could it be like that? But it was always Morten who decided at the end how the things were going to be, and then I took care of the other parts, which is kind of the more communication and storytelling, as it's called, and kind of presenting ourselves and our ideas and what we wanted to do.
Today, if I understood correctly, Morten is not actively helping with the brand Linde Werdelin anymore, right?
So Morten is, I would say, a passive partner, and we speak and communicate about the things that we're doing. But Morten has started some years ago with his wife and some of his children a design studio, which is other I would say very artistic pieces and design in interior and furniture, etc., etc. And the reason that we kind of separated in that way is that Morten wanted to do other design, and you may remember that we did a bicycle and we did some skis and we did some other things, and we were also, I think, when you develop a watch and with that a brand, you have to there's a very creative period. At least that's how I feel about it. There's a very creative period where you move very quickly and you sort of improve, and it's an intellectual development phase where you start out with something which is maybe less complicated, and then over time you sort of develop into the final product. And I think we reached the final product probably around 13 to 15, in the sense that we had established the Spiderlight family and the Octopus family, and when you then have I would say kind of 90% of the design, there really isn't that much to do on an everyday basis. And if you look at other, some of the most successful brands, they have done that, right? They you take the Royal Oak, for instance, or you take the Nautilus or the Rolex. These are models that were developed maybe in the 50s and in the 70s and are representative of their time. But in the last 50 to 70 years, or you take the Reverso, which is more than 90 years now, which is an icon and an absolutely beautiful piece. Then you go into another stage where it's much more evolutionary, right? You change a little bit, you quote unquote, you improve a little bit, or and it becomes less of a design phase. And that was what we reached, and that's probably where Morten thought, I am not that busy anymore. I need to do something else. So hence we are where we are.
So please walk us through now back in time. So you guys created that amazing modular hybrid mechanical and computer tool watch. Then what?
Yeah. So we did this, and you can imagine, I mean, it was super fun. And I think we both laughed. I still laugh, going to Switzerland. I was there last week. Being with the factories, discussing how things are done. But But from the beginning, when we developed the computer or the instrument, there was this sort of nobody had ever taken a mechanical movement and put a computer so close, right? And you have to think about magnetism and other things that can impact the accuracy of a movement. So there was a lot of testing going on, and the other problem we had was, how do we make it thin enough so that the instrument doesn't overpower the watch, and how do they design wise and construction wise work together so that we, as a client, you wouldn't lose your instrument. So it was really, quite complicated, and today when you see the design of the watch case, it is very much impacted by the original idea of putting an instrument, kind of sliding it over the top of the watch and fixing it on the side. And for me, I guess that is also part of the Danish cultural heritage. It's about this functionality. And when I talk about Danish culture, it's because I don't think that Linde Werdelin is Danish design as such, because Danish design can tend to be very minimalistic. And that is not something that, personally, I'm a great proponent for, because I think simplistic design can also very easily become quite boring. So we wanted to have this Danish culture. Not wanted. I think it's very natural that it came into it, but still has something which was fairly complex and fairly, something that you can enjoy over a long time. And funny enough, on that, you know Christian Hagen.
Of course. Good mate of mine. Yeah, love him.
Well, exactly, and known Christian for many years, and and he's had quite a few of our watches, both bought from us and bought secondhand market, etc. And it's not more than 6 months ago or something. He said, "Jorn, I never noticed in an octopus double date the dial shows an octopus with 4 tentacles at 4 and 5 o'clock and 7 and 8 o'clock." And I was like so surprised. I said, "Christy, are you serious? You never thought about this before? Didn't I tell you anything?" No. And for me, it also shows that after many years, you can have a piece that you look at, and you can still experience something new. And I think that's really important in a watch, that you can enjoy it over a long time. And you can. But that's sometimes what we say, is that if you put on your Linde Werdelin in the morning and it makes you smile for a couple of seconds, then we've done our job. That's it.
And interesting about what you said about designs and about Danish design and Scandinavian design, and I want to already now re-invite you to come back on the show, because Rob and I love design and designers. We're thinking of doing a TRTS symposium with just designers.
Okay.
So hereby you already have a rain check for an invitation to come back physically and on air. It's amazing actually listening to you, and it's funny that what Christian said about the octopus, and I've always known he's one of your biggest fans. Together with my Dutch friend Robert Jan Boer, he also used to have one, so I used to rock his Linde Werdelin. And Christian's one. I believe you guys even did a collab with Christian, didn't you?
Oh yeah. So in 2016, I was in Miami and doing some work over there, and I speak to Christian, and somehow we get into that he missed out on a 3-timer with a green dial, and I said to him, well, maybe we can do one which is your color, and so we did a small series of 33 with his colors, which is kind of an olive green blue, inspired by Barber and Land Rovers, etc., kind of, a bit sort of, nature, right? And that was quite successful, and that led us on to do more three-timer series, and we kept on with the three-timer between 2016, and the Christian Hagen edition was the first of them, and then we stopped that at the end of 22 with the Sunset collection, very aptly named. So that was kind of the inspiration for, what is that, a 7-year period of three-timers.
So I've always seen you guys as pioneers, pushing the envelope, thinking out of the box. It started obviously with your first watch. So the hybrid watch of a mechanical watch with a modular board computer or a skiing computer or a trip computer, whatever you want to call it. Edgy designs. You guys were Danish, went to London, made it already a hybrid company because you couldn't put you guys into a square or a box, always thinking out of the box. You did that collab with, I hate the word influencer. Christian is a force on his own and by himself and has his own style, both in dressing, indeed, with his waxed jackets and his wing boots and his Defender and his green and the collabs you guys did. And then you guys gave me a blast from the past this last 2 weeks. I got an email from you guys because you kept on pushing the envelope on innovation. You did one of the first brands, maybe the first, that did pre-owned. Yep. So their own watches are pre-owned. You did direct-to-consumer, one of the first. You did e-com, one of the first. And I believe you guys were the first watch brand to work with King Nerd. So Johnny Dowell. And that blew my mind, but I forgot it. And you guys dropped a press release that your guys are auctioning off one of the old pieces he did.
Yep.
And hopefully this episode airs 2 days after the auction went live on your own.com, so lindewerdelin.com. I believe it runs from the 28th of November until the 8th of December, if I remember correctly, from the press release. So let's talk about these two things. So those that are not aware who King Nerd is, he's a super cool dude. I call him a tattooist for metal. So he's an engraver. He's an artist who expresses himself in metal. Do I summarize that correctly?
I think very much so, and I think the difference between Johnny, so his artist name is King Nerd, but his real name is Johnny Dowell, and I think the difference between Johnny and other engravers is that he's very creative in terms of what he will engrave, and the how he does it and the storytelling of it. He contacted us in 2014. He had seen one of our watches in a hotel, and I think actually in Lisbon in Portugal. And he called us, and we spoke. And initially, we had worked on another piece with a Danish tattoo artist called Henning Jørgensen from something called Royal Tattoo. So we'd already done an octopus tattoo, and we had this idea about engraving, that it was something the old seafarers did when they traveled, and we were also in a time, I guess we still are, where everybody has a tattoo, and one of the reasons that I don't have a tattoo is I don't want to have something that I can't take off. So we got this idea, well, why don't we put a tattoo onto the watch and you will enjoy it, and then when you take the watch off and the tattoo off, you're good for something else. So Johnny contacts us and we start working on the first collaboration, which was called The Reef, on an octopus, and then we did another one called Crazy Universe, and a third one called Volcano, which we did a few years ago, I think maybe 3 years ago. And then we thought, well, let's do one piece where you have complete artistic freedom. You can do, really whatever you want to do. And it was during the pandemic, so it was also a bit on and off because obviously we couldn't meet each other, and people were generally busy with surviving, or a lot of other non-watch related things. And then when we assembled the piece, and it was a little bit like with the volcano. The volcano, neither Johnny nor I actually knew, would it be cool or would it be awful? And sometimes you have to take these chances, right? Where you say, well, let's go for it. And, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. But if you never try that, then you never break any barriers, right? You will only do what other people have already done. And then when we assembled what we then came to, call the monster, and I'll tell you why it's called the monster. We just found that it was an absolutely beautiful piece, obviously. And when I looked at it and I studied, it just reminded me of, one of Jules Verne's stories, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And which is a story about Captain Nemo sailing the oceans, and initially the submarine that he has built or developed, people think that it's a monster, hence the name Monster. And I just thought the story about something that happens in the 1850s, with a U-boat or submarine, and it was just very romantic, and it's a time of exploration, right? And it's I think from us these days, it's just a time of great progress and innocence that that certainly I don't feel today in today's world. So hence it became the octopus monster. And then we had this idea that, well, it's a one-off piece. So how do we price it? I mean, at the end of the day, either it's priced too highly or too cheaply. And then we thought, well, let's put it on an auction. But one thing with an auction is that you have to pay a 25-30% premium. And I thought, well, why don't we do our own auction? And it was, in the vein of pre-owned, which we started, as you rightly say, we were the first one in the industry to do it back in May 2016. And since then, many brands have taken upon them to do it, including recently Rolex. And when we did pre-owned, which is another story I can get to, but the auction facility which we launched last week, I think it's a way for us to communicate with our customers, because and engage with them. So for me, it's not so much of achieving a super high price. And as you probably know, also some of these auctions these days, it's actually more about marketing and about branding than buying a watch. And the brands use it mostly to tell the industry at large, see how expensive our watches are. They are investments. They are investment assets. And while that can be true, I just find that the whole idea of making watches and selling watches and buying watches should not be whether it is an investment asset. It should be whether it's a beautiful timepiece that you will enjoy wearing for some time. And so for us, the auction facility is not branding, marketing. It is more communication with our community. And I can see from the people who have already registered for the auction that a lot of them are existing good clients that already have 1, 3, 7, 10 pieces, and that's really the people that it caters to.
For our dear listeners, the auction this is the inaugural auction of this watch. Afterwards, you'll continue with pre-owned pieces. This particular pièce unique, so the unique piece, is the fourth collab with King Nerd, is a new one. Did I answer that correctly?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And walk us through the steps for those that are considering to register. So you go to lindewerdelin.com, you find the auction probably on the homepage, and then what?
Yeah, so I mean, simple process. You go on our website, you register, your name, your contact details, and also your credit card. You will not get charged anything, but it's kind of also just a measure that people are, serious about it. We don't want people to bid on it, and not really. I mean, just for the fun of it, if you see what I mean. And then the auction starts on the 28th of November at 2:00 and finishes on the 8th at 8 p.m. And then the winner will be contacted by us personally, and that'll be that. It's a fairly simple process. Building it was not so simple, but obviously we wanted to use kind of methods that other auction sites have used, right, and try and make it as easy and as transparent for the bidders as possible.
So I see that regular Octopus Moon models retail between a 15,000 and about 20 plus. I see a engraved one around 25. What did you do with this inaugural auction? Is there a reserve? Is there a minimum? Do you communicate a estimate like classic auction houses?
We have put on a reserve of 10,000 Swiss. I didn't want it to be, aggressive in it, because obviously there's also a difference between the watches that we have. We don't sell them. People buy them in their own time. But an auction is different because you have this, the deadline, right? The watch will be sold to the person who on Friday the 8th at 8 p.m. has decided this is what I want to pay today. So there's that sort of timing difference. Whether someone will pay 20 or 25, we don't know. And I think it's less to the point. Obviously, we would like to achieve a good price for it, but it's really up to the bidders, right? Who wants to do that on a Friday on the 8th at 8 p.m. And we will see.
It indeed underlines what you just said, that this is all about marketing, getting the message out. Because if you think about it, worst case scenario, you just meet your reserve. That's way below cost price, because King Nerd spent over 200 hours just engraving, let alone the production of the watch. Super cool what you're doing. Kudos to you. I hope it will reach a record-breaking amount, because it is a true piece of art. I've been following King Nerd actually because of Linde Werdelin, and then because of the friends of the show, Mr. Enthusiast, our dear friend Phil Toledano did two cool pieces with Johnny, Rolex watches, and obviously our English friend George Bamford did several collabs with him. Johnny's also a sneakerhead like I am, and I love his coins that he engraved. So for those that are fascinated, check Johnny on Instagram, handles at King Nerd, Nerd. From there, dear Jorn, let's talk about regular pieces, which obviously is an understatement. Walk us through the collection. So today, there are two models. We have the Octopus and Spido. Walk us please through what is the brand today about. Two models, what is the design language, what's the philosophy, and how much do you guys do in-house, both design and manufacturing?
The two families are representative of our two universes. And that stems and goes back to the beginning. So, as I said earlier, when we started with the instruments, it came from skiing, which something that I have had passion is such a misused word, but it's something that I enjoy a lot and have done for many years. And that was one of the sort of the mainstays of the brand already from the beginning, and kind of the origin of the idea. At the beginning, we had what we called the biphometer, which was a more traditional timepiece in steel with eta movements and a traditional turning bezel. It was one family, which I guess these days we kind of call the classic family. And then in 2007, 8, I think it was, we sponsored, or we participated in an adventure with Conrad Anker and Leo Holding. And Leo Holding has been an LW explorer ever since 2007. And they were going to do a film about George Mallory climbing Everest. And the short of it, that story is that they never knew whether George Mallory actually made it to the top of Everest. So they wanted to recreate that whole scenario with free climbing Everest in traditional gear. So anyway, so we gave them a few of our watches and said we look forward to hearing how it went when you come down the mountain. And we had a meeting in our office in Notting Hill, London, and we sit across them, and they tell us, well, at base camp we took the watch off, and we only carried the instrument to the top, and we were obviously, very disappointed. I think it's a mild expression, right? Because the whole idea was that for us, you have the watch and the instrument on top, right? And obviously not that you leave the watch behind. And they say, well, why don't you develop a lighter watch so that we can wear it to the top? And Morten went back to the drawing board, and instead of just finding a light material, which we did, using titanium instead of steel, he also came up with the idea of skeletonizing the case, and again, something aesthetically unique, but came from a functionality point of view. And he looked at racing cars, Formula 1 cars, rally cars, etc., where you get rid of everything unnecessary, and you kind of just retain the essence of what is necessary to keep the car running as fast as possible. And likewise here, taking away the kind of the insides, the unnecessary parts, but still retaining the structure and the aesthetics of the timepiece. And that became the spider light. And obviously the name has connotation with being light and the spider web. And it's, I think also the name is sort of maybe a little bit time typical of the noughties, right? And then when we had developed the computer for diving called the Reef, we felt that we needed to update the octopus, which is the family that goes into the sea. And we used a lot of the construction from the instrument into the timepiece, the screws, and we dropped the turning bezel, because obviously we had all that functionality in the instrument. And then also, instead of having a monocoque construction of the case, we felt this sort of very kind of Lego type, that we had an inner case which was representative of a diving bell, and we had this idea that you have a diving bell, and inside the diving bell you have life, and obviously for us the movement is the life. and we need to protect that. And then we had entities at 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 3 o'clock that we added onto the central case, and that became the octopus. And obviously within that is also our strap system, which is that every strap fits every watch. So again, I would say the design and the construction is a bit sort of modular. Again, I think Danish, being practical about things, and look to the what is it that we actually using these things for, and making them slightly functional.
Talking about the production, you said you often love to go to Switzerland. You're often there. Is everything Swiss made with Linde Werdelin?
Yes, it is, except for some of our rubber straps are made in an Italian factory, which it's probably the best factory for making rubber. They were kind of the people that invented the smell-free rubber strap for Hublot back in the 70s. So they're kind of the original. But apart from that, everything is made in Switzerland. But you will also notice that we do not put Swiss made in our dial. And you know the whole thing about the Swiss made, it needs to be 51 or 60%, which is also, it's kind of a really, right? I mean, what's the point of that? You're trying to sell something, being Swiss, and actually it really isn't that much Swiss, right? And so we, I think the quality, the volume, the complexity means that we can only make it in Switzerland, and it's also where the people are, the experience, the machines, the proximity of everyone. The people that works on the dial, the people that works on the complication, one type of case, because our gold cases are made in a different factory from titanium, from carbon, etc., etc. And I mean, it's all driving distance. And I just doubt that you can do anything to that quality level outside of Switzerland. Not that we would want to.
And talking about calibers, what do you use for Linde Werdelin?
In the original family, the biphometer and the 3 timers, ETA 2892 and ETA 2893. In the Spider Light, Spider Speed family, we use we use movements from the Concepto factory, which is the Jacquet family that owns that. And in the Octopus, we use bases with a Dubois complication and an in-house develops and designed move phase complication. We have also worked with briefly. We worked with Sven Andersen. We did some watches with him, and we also worked with Frédéric Piquet movements. And then we have another generation coming in the future, which is slightly different. We also actually do work with Jean-François Mouchon of Chronote. The Spider Lights 3D is a movement that we've done with him. So there's in the history we've gone through a development which started with ETA movements. And then moved sort of in I would say in various directions. And what we found with the Peking movements, that they were actually a little bit too fine to be used in a proper sports watch. And while I would say that what we do is hopefully up to a very high standard and a very high quality, I don't consider us to be what I think is haute horlogerie, which is a very singular focus on the movement itself, and where everything else becomes secondary or tertiary. For us, it's more of a, I'm not sure if holistic approach is quite the right word, but maybe a balancing out of of what is inside and what's outside, and the purpose of the watch. And given that they are watches from sports, we want them to be able to sustain extreme conditions, and not extreme impacts, but extreme conditions, very cold, obviously deep down in the sea, and we want people to wear our watches when they do their activities, right? It's not a timepiece that you keep in your safe or in your drawer and then take on some god awful plastic watch, right?
You gave me a wonderful segue now, because you gave me an opening to ask about the future. You're only 21 years old, company-wise. So in the US, you're eligible to have some alcohol. So it's time to party. What's in the pipeline for the brand Linde Werdelin, for you? And tell us a bit more about the people behind it, and also the explorers, because you indicate you have some explorers. You can find them on the website as well. Bring us more into the LW world and the future, please.
Right now, or in these, say, last year and the next year, we are in a bit of a pivoting phase, if we can call it that. First of all, as I said earlier, we have decided to very slowly go a little bit back into wholesale or retail, which is a big decision for us. And then secondly, we are working on what I call our third generation of watches, which will be the next generation of the Octopus and the next generation of the Spider Lights. And obviously that is it takes time, and also it's an effort where we kind of need to make sure that it goes smoothly, and we do it at the right time, and that will involve a slightly different case design for both. For people who don't know about Linde Werdelin, they probably wouldn't be able to see it, but for people who do know Linde Werdelin, they will be able to tell the difference. And then at the same time, we are also working on the movements and some of the functionality in the movements. So it's quite a big it's a big project for us to do that, and I think it is the right time to do it. So that is the future. As for the Explorers, we recently started with a very young Portuguese big wave surfer as a new explorer, and it was something that I think before I came to Portugal, I just didn't know what it was, and then after a couple of times having been up to Nazaré and also watching the 100-foot wave, I was just so amazed about these people that go out and they kind of conquer these huge waves. And the way I can describe it is it's a little bit like skiing down a mountain with an avalanche right behind you. And I mean, that's literally what they do. These huge waves that are 30, 40 meters high, and they just surf them like it's a 1 or 2 meter. So we thought that was a very because we obviously get approached by people if we want to sponsor them, or they can be explorers. But for us, it's not so much. It's not about being competitive. And for instance, with Leo Holding, when he goes on an expedition, it is not about climbing the highest mountain, the quickest, the most. It's about a proper exploration and an adventure. And he just came back from some months ago, an expedition to Canada. But also some years back, they did an expedition to a mountain in Guyana called Mount Roraima, and it means sleeping 6 nights up the mountain, which is super vertical and starts as a jungle with mud everywhere, and ends up obviously, I think 4,000 feet higher up, or maybe and with being cold and freezing, etc., etc. And for me, our Explorers is about the adventure and the exploration, and not about these record achievements, which I think so many brands do, and obviously will do a lot better than us. And I think that as a business, right, it is very, very hard for us to compete straight on with other brands, because either they have been around much, much longer, and it is much easier for people to buy them, or they are financed by big investors, and literally have no limit to how much money they can spend on marketing, etc. And that's really, so we've always tried to maneuver in different ways, and to approach things different, and hence also with the Explorers, that we're not trying to find the best Formula One driver, which we probably would have to pay millions to be associated with, etc., etc.
Talking about pioneering and what I would call organic partnerships and holistic ambassadors, you were, I believe, also one of the first brands to communicate about their sustainability. Would you elaborate a bit about that, please?
Well, first of all, I would mention the Danish culture. When you're in Scandinavia, you find that we are not more conscious about the environment and how we treat it. So we're a lot further ahead on renewables. We don't just throw things out; we reuse them. It's a sort of a more aesthetic, culture, and I think that goes very well into the sustainability. And I think there's something about mechanical timepieces that when you make them, they hopefully should last for a long time. And which also then goes into the design, because you want to have a design which is not very time typical, but something that will last for a very long time, which makes the watch itself sustainable. But anyways, so it's been something that was on our mind really from the beginning. And then when these things became more pertinent, we started thinking more about how can we actually try and not to waste so much. And it's not just one thing. It literally goes through, how do you produce, what do you produce, how do you marketing something, do you produce endless amount of catalogs that get sent around the world, how do you sell, how much do you travel, what do you make, rubber straps off, the boxes, etc. And it's all, it's a very long-term process. So people or brands that say, oh, we are super green because we buy carbon offset, carbon coupons, right, or whatever they do. It's a little bit like, well, that's just a marketing attitude, right, to get people to buy more of your stuff. And how you should really think about it is a complete, sort of, rule set of how do you operate in your day-to-day business, so. As a small example, we spoke to the factory that makes our rubber straps about if we could do recycled rubber straps. And for some years, they said that it's not possible because the raw rubber get vulcanized, and you can't reverse that process. But then they found out how to use some of the scrapings that naturally come when you produce rubber straps, and to integrate that into the rubber. And so all our rubber straps now are, it's a natural product and it's non-animistic. But it also uses 30% recycled. So, which then also makes sure that aesthetically and also, wearability is the same. Because the problem is when you up the recycled materials, then you start feeling that the quality of the rubber strap is not what you would like. So there's always a balancing act of how far you can go and how far you want to go. Our new boxes have also been redesigned, right, so that you can use your watch box for traveling and for carrying, extra straps. But also we make it out of, I think they're made out of, grape skins now. And when you look at them and you feel them, it feels exactly like leather, but it's actually, grape skin. And I think all these things, right, just makes you, it's a challenge. But it's also very sensible and a positive challenge, and it also goes into production of the cases. We are communicating with a factory that use solar energy for melting down recycled metals. But at the end, it's a process, and I think it's something that everybody should really do. And in 2020, we were rewarded an award by something called Positive Luxury, which basically had to do with our pre-owned, right? That, we're very happy to take people's used watches in and sell them again, right? And they felt that was a very important step for the industry to take responsibility for that.
Jorn, thank you so much. I could continue talking to you for hours.
Likewise.
You have this relaxed tone of voice, vibe. You could definitely take this for hours. You're a very easy guest. I hardly had any work this episode, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a joy. I am definitely going to see what the bidding war is going to yield for you guys. I wish you the best of luck. It is a stunning piece. It's lovely to hear that you guys are alive and kicking, that you're working on the third decade. For our dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode. You can find all our previous episodes on our official website, www.therealtime.show. And on Instagram, you can find us on our new handle @therealtime.show. If you want to support the show, please subscribe, like, rate, and share it with your friends. If you have any questions, feedback, and or criticism, please do send us a message. You can also DM us if you want to join the TRTS community. You can reach Rob via email, rob@therealtime.show, and on Instagram, you can find him @robnuts. You can message me via alon@therealtime.show, and on the gram, you can find me @AlonBenJoseph. Stay sane and keep on ticking.